She stood outside the glass doors, her fingers tightening around the worn leather strap of her bag. The building in front of her gleamed under the city lights, a place she had once dreamed of being a part of. Now she wasn't sure if she wanted to step inside. But she had no choice. She took a deep breath and walked through the entrance, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The receptionist barely glanced at her. She recognized that look. It was the same one she had seen too many times before. Dismissive. Unimpressed. She was just another person passing through, another face that would disappear by the end of the day. But she knew better. She wasn't here to fade away. Minutes later, she sat in a cold conference room, her heart pounding as she faced the panel in front of her. The executives looked at her with skepticism, flipping through the pages of her proposal, like they had already made up their minds. She had spent months preparing for this moment, perfecting every detail, every number, every strategy. And yet, their expressions didn't change. When she finished speaking, there was silence. Then came the questions, sharp, calculated, designed to test her, to poke holes in her confidence. She answered each one, refusing to let them see the doubt creeping into her mind. But then, one of them leaned forward, smirking slightly. "Interesting idea," he said. "But let's be honest. You don't have the experience. You don't have the resources. And frankly, you don't have what it takes to pull this off." The words hit harder than she expected, not because she believed them, but because she had heard them before. Too many times. Every failure, every rejection, every moment of self-doubt flashed through her mind. She clenched her hands under the table, willing herself to stay composed. She had learned a long time ago that showing emotion in a room like this was seen as weakness. So instead, she nodded, gathered her papers, and stood. "Thank you for your time," she said, her voice steady. As she walked out, she could feel their eyes on her, already moving on, already forgetting she had ever been there. But they would remember her. She would make sure of it. The elevator doors closed, and she finally let out a breath. She had failed again. Or at least, that's what they thought. What they didn't realize was that failure wasn't an ending for her. It never had been. It was fuel. By the time she stepped onto the street, the doubt had turned into determination. They had called her a failure today. But soon, they would call her something else. Something they never saw coming. They would call her boss. She walked down the crowded sidewalk, the city's hum filling the air around her. The rejection still lingered in her mind, but instead of weighing her down, it only fueled her. She had been here before, underestimated, dismissed, overlooked. It was a feeling she knew well, but she had never let it define her. This time wouldn't be any different. She made her way to a small cafe tucked between towering office buildings. It was the kind of place where people came to work, to plan, to dream. She slid into a corner booth, pulled out her notebook, and started writing. Every failure had a lesson, and she wasn't going to let this one go to waste. She thought back to where it all began. The first time she realized the world didn't hand out opportunities, you had to take them. She had spent years building herself up, learning, growing, pushing past every obstacle. She didn't have the advantages some people did, but she had something else: resilience. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A message from an old colleague. "Saw what happened today. They'll regret it." She smirked, shaking her head. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Either way, she wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, she threw herself into her work. She refined her pitch, tightened her numbers, and reached out to every connection she had. She wasn't going to wait for approval from people who didn't believe in her. She would create her own path. Late nights blurred into early mornings. She built a small team, people who believed in her vision, who saw the potential when others didn't. They worked out of coffee shops, tiny office spaces, sometimes even her apartment. They weren't just chasing success, they were proving a point. The industry wasn't kind to people like her. It demanded perfection, but only from those it didn't already favor. She saw others getting opportunities handed to them, doors opening with barely a knock. But she wasn't asking for permission anymore. Investors started to take notice. Some dismissed her, the same way they always had. But others were intrigued. She had something different: grit, authenticity, a perspective they hadn't considered. And then, slowly, things started to shift. A meeting with a potential backer. A deal that could change everything. She sat in another boardroom, but this time, she wasn't the one hoping to be seen. They were the ones leaning in, asking questions, considering what she had to offer. She didn't need validation anymore. She had already decided her worth. But she wasn't just here for herself. She was here for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. The city stretched out in front of her as she left the meeting, the skyline lit up like a promise. This was just the beginning. The city's pulse was relentless, and so was she. Each step forward brought new challenges, but she had long accepted that nothing worthwhile came easy. The meeting had gone well better than she had expected, but it wasn't a victory yet. Promises in business were just words until they turned into action. And she had been let down before. Her team was small but determined. They worked late into the night, refining their strategy, anticipating every possible setback. She had built something real, something that had the potential to shake up the industry, but the resistance was everywhere. Established players didn't want to make room for her. Investors who showed interest hesitated at the last second, always finding an excuse. Some questioned her experience. Others didn't think she had the right connections. A few even suggested she partner with someone more established to give her venture credibility. She knew what they really meant. Despite the obstacles, momentum was growing. Clients were intrigued by what she was offering. It was different, innovative, something they hadn't seen before. And that scared people. She could sense the pushback, the subtle ways some were trying to shut her out. Meetings were cancelled last minute. Promises were withdrawn. It wasn't paranoia. She had seen it happen to others who had tried to carve their own path. But she refused to back down. If they wouldn't give her a seat at the table, she would build her own. Her team wasn't just a group of employees, they were believers. They had left behind secure jobs, ignored warnings from skeptics, and thrown themselves into something uncertain. They trusted her vision, and she wasn't about to let them down. One evening, after another long day of pitching and strategizing, she sat by the window of her tiny office, watching the rain blur the city lights. Her phone rang. It was an old acquaintance, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. He had heard about what she was doing. "Be careful," he warned. "People don't like change. And they'll do whatever it takes to protect what they have." She knew that already. But hearing it out loud sent a chill down her spine. The next few weeks were a test of endurance. An unexpected competitor emerged, offering something eerily similar to her idea. It wasn't just coincidence someone had stolen her concept. A connection she had once trusted had taken what she built and repackaged it. For someone with more influence, the betrayal was sharp, but the anger burned hotter. She had two choices: fight back or walk away. And walking away had never been an option. The battle wasn't just about business anymore. It was about proving that she wouldn't be erased. About showing everyone who had ever been underestimated that they were more powerful than they realized. The war had just begun. The weight of betrayal sat heavy on her chest, but there was no time to dwell on it. She had learned long ago that in moments like these, action mattered more than emotions. There was too much at stake. She gathered her team, laying out everything on the table: the stolen idea, the new competition, and what they were up against. The room was tense, but no one wavered. They had come too far to let someone else take what they had built. The next few weeks were a blur of restless nights and relentless work. Every move was calculated, every decision critical. She knew they couldn't afford a single mistake. While the competition had the advantage of influence, they had something stronger: the truth. Their concept wasn't just another business plan. It was built on passion, experience, and a real desire to change the game. That couldn't be replicated. But the opposition wasn't backing down. Suddenly, doors that were once open were now shut. Investors who had shown interest were withdrawing. Potential clients hesitated, unsure of whether to take a risk on her or go with the safer, well-connected competitor. The media caught wind of the situation, spinning their own narratives. Some painted her as an underdog fighting against the odds, while others questioned if she was in over her head. She wasn't just battling for her company anymore. She was fighting for her credibility, her reputation, her future. Then, the threats started. Some subtle, some direct, a reminder that she was stepping into territory where people didn't play fair. She wasn't naive. She knew that success in this space meant disrupting systems that had been in place for years. But the lengths people were willing to go to protect their power still shocked her. Then came the final blow: a lawsuit. False claims, fabricated evidence, all designed to slow her down, drain her resources, and break her spirit. It was a tactic as old as time, and she knew exactly what it was meant to do. She also knew that if she lost this battle, everything she had built would be destroyed. Her team was shaken. Some were afraid. Others were angry. But none of them were ready to give up. She stared at the legal documents spread across her desk, feeling the weight of the moment. This was the defining point. The world was watching. Every decision she made from this moment forward would determine not just the future of her company, but the story that would be told about her. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and made her choice. If they wanted a fight, she would give them one. She knew the lawsuit was a trap, designed to exhaust her time, money, and energy. But she wasn't going to let them dictate the terms of the battle. Instead of reacting out of fear, she took a step back and analyzed everything from a new angle. If they had gone this far, then there had to be something they were desperate to hide. Late nights turned into early mornings as she and her legal team dug through every document, every email, every deal that had been made. At first, it seemed like a dead end. The lawsuit was structured too perfectly. The accusations built on layers of carefully crafted deception. But then, a single overlooked detail changed everything. A name buried in one of the contracts, someone she hadn't thought about in years. She immediately made a call. The voice on the other end hesitated before speaking. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." That was all the confirmation she needed. There was more to this than just a business rivalry. This was personal. And it wasn't just about her company anymore. Someone had been pulling strings from the shadows, orchestrating everything from the stolen idea to the sudden roadblocks, ensuring that no matter what move she made, she would always be 2 steps behind. The realization sent a chill through her. She had been focused on fighting what was in front of her, but the real threat had been lurking behind the scenes the entire time. Then, the second blow came. One of her closest team members, someone she had trusted completely, resigned without warning. No explanation, no goodbye. Just a brief message saying it was for the best. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Either they had been threatened, or worse, they had been part of this from the start. Doubt crept in. Had she been so focused on the external battle that she had ignored the war happening within her own walls? She knew she couldn't afford to second-guess herself now. The stakes had just risen higher than ever, and if she didn't act fast, everything she had fought for would slip through her fingers. But before she could make her next move, another message arrived. Anonymous. Short. Chilling. "You were never meant to win this." For the first time in a long time, fear settled in. Not because of what they were trying to take from her, but because of what she might have to do to fight back. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The message was meant to rattle her, to make her doubt everything. But instead, it had the opposite effect. If they were trying to scare her, It meant she was closer to the truth than they wanted her to be. She knew she couldn't trust anyone now, not even the people she once considered allies. She had to act fast, think ahead. The lawsuit was just one part of the plan. But the real question was who was behind all of it. And why? She retraced every step, every decision she had made since the beginning. That name hidden in the contract, the one she almost overlooked it, had to mean something. She dug deeper, cross-referencing deals, tracing connections. And then it hit her. The betrayal had come from the person she least expected, the one who had always stood beside her, the one who had been there from the very start. A confrontation was inevitable. She arranged a meeting, choosing a public space where no one could manipulate the situation. The moment she saw them, she knew. Their silence spoke louder than any words. "You," she said, barely able to contain the anger in her voice. "It was you all along." A slow smile formed on their face, but it wasn't one of remorse. "You never saw it coming, did you?" The truth unraveled like a tightly wound thread, finally snapping. They had been feeding information to her competitors, setting her up to fail. The lawsuit, the stolen ideas, the sudden resignations, everything had been carefully orchestrated. She felt the weight of years of trust shatter in an instant, but she refused to let it break her. "You think this is over?" she said, meeting their gaze. They leaned in slightly, voice calm. "It was over before you even started." For a split second, doubt flickered in her mind. But then, something unexpected happened. A call came through. Her legal team had uncovered something game-changing, evidence that turned the entire lawsuit against them. The hidden deals, the illegal transactions, the forged signatures. Everything they had done to ruin her was now the very thing that would bring them down. Her betrayer's face paled as they realized what this meant. "You played the game well," she said, standing taller. "But you underestimated me." And with that, the power shifted. The lawsuit collapsed, her company was secured, and the ones who tried to take her down found themselves exposed. But even as she walked away victorious, she knew this wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to herself that no matter how many times people tried to break her, she would rise. Stronger, smarter, unstoppable. She stood outside, the cool evening air wrapping around her like a quiet reassurance. The battle was over. Not just the lawsuit, not just the betrayal, everything. The years of doubt, the struggle to prove herself, the weight of other people's expectations. She had carried it all for so long, but now, it was finally behind her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her lawyer, confirming the final outcome. The case was officially dismissed, her name cleared, and the damage to her company reversed. The people who tried to ruin her were facing consequences they never anticipated. The betrayal had cost them everything. She exhaled slowly, letting the relief settle in. Walking back into her office, she glanced around at the space she had built from the ground up. It wasn't just about the business. It was about proving to herself that she was more than what people said she was. That she didn't need approval, didn't need permission to succeed. She had earned this, and no one could take it away from her. The news of her victory spread quickly. Headlines changed from scandal to redemption. Investors who had hesitated were now eager to return. Former employees reached out, wanting to be part of something great again. But she knew better now. Trust was something to be given carefully, not freely. She took the next few weeks to rebuild not just the company, but herself. She restructured her leadership team, making sure that only those who truly believed in her vision remained. She revisited old ideas that had been pushed aside in the chaos, bringing them to life in ways she never had the chance to before. And most importantly, she gave herself time to breathe, to reflect. One afternoon, she received an invitation, an industry event where she was being honored for her resilience and innovation. A year ago, she might have declined, preferring to stay in the background. But not anymore. She had a story to tell, one that others needed to hear. As she stepped onto the stage that night, the room fell silent. They were waiting for her to speak, waiting to hear how she had survived, how she had won. She looked across the sea of faces, knowing that some of them had doubted her, some had rooted for her downfall. But she wasn't here for them. She took a deep breath and spoke, not just about the betrayal or the lawsuit, but about the journey. About resilience, about believing in yourself even when no one else does. About how success isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time. When she finished, the applause was deafening, but she didn't need validation anymore. She had already won the most important battle, the one within herself. As she left the event that night, she realized something. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning.